Jack Reacher is a ghost, served in the military police. A brilliant investigator. Troublemaker, too. Then, 2 years ago, he disappears. You don't find this guy unless he wants to be found.
Excuse me, sir. There's a Jack Reacher here to see you.
Velkommen til Filmz TV. I dag er der biografpremiere på Christopher McQuarries Jack Reacher, en actionspækket thriller med en veloplagt Tom Cruise i titelrollen. Reacher er en tidligere militærbetjent, som nu dukker op, hvorend der er ballade og slyngler på spil. Han er ageret hovedperson i efterhånden 17 populære spændingsromaner siden 1997, men først nu dukker han op på det hvide lærred. Og Filmz TV var for nylig i Stockholm, hvor vi interviewede både McQuarrie og filmens 2 hovedrolleindehavere, Cruise og engelske Rosamund Pike, som var troppet op til en stor gallapremiere. Jack Reacher er en blændende thriller i stil med genrens helt store klassikere fra 1970'erne, såsom Dirty Harry og 3 døgn for Condor, så det er svært at fatte, at dette blot er McQuarries anden spillefilm som instruktør. Han er mere vant til at sidde foran skrivemaskinen, og blot som 25-årig vandt han en Oscar for sit monumentale manuskript til Bryan Singers The Usual Suspects. McQuarrie mødte første gang Tom Cruise, da han skrev manuskriptet til den udmærkede 2. verdenskrig-thriller Operation Valkyrie, og de klikkede øjeblikkeligt. Siden da har McQuarrie også arbejdet på Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, og McQuarrie og Cruise planlægger allerede en ny Reacher-film, og måske endda også Mission Impossible 5.
It's interesting to me that you've written several scripts, but Jack Reacher's only your second feature film as a director.
Yes.
How come you waited 12 years to get in the director's chair again?
I didn't wait. I was working very hard to get back in the director's chair. My first film, The Way of the Gun, was a very destylized and probably a very nihilistic movie. It was not something that was terribly commercial either in its content or the way that it was shot. So I don't think anybody was anxious to offer me another chance. And I also had the tendency to develop projects for myself that were very difficult to get made. I was leaning much more towards a less commercial angle, and I was quite stubborn about it.
But is it in any way intimidating to get back in the director's chair after so many years, and then it's on a potentially big franchise movie with probably arguably the biggest movie star in the world in front of the camera? It must be jumping in off the deep end, as you say.
Well, it would appear that way on paper, but I actually eased into it. I had worked with Tom on Valkyrie. We'd worked together on Ghost Protocol. So I had a rapport with Tom, and I had a great deal of experience getting back into making movies on a much bigger scale with Valkyrie. So Jack Reacher felt like a fairly natural progression. And compared to Valkyrie, Jack Reacher was actually a smaller movie.
What is it that makes you two guys click, especially?
You know, we really see eye to eye when it comes to story and storytelling. How to tell a story, what's important about storytelling, and how important storytelling is, where it falls in our list of priorities. And for Tom and I, it's both the most important aspect of filmmaking. So we tend to finish one another's sentences, and we tend to understand instinctively what the other one is looking for in the way of storytelling. And that's just a big relief. It's very hard to find somebody with whom you really see eye to eye on the things that matter most to you.
One of the things that I really loved about the movie is that it's sort of an antidote to these haphazardly edited thrillers that we often have now in modern times. It really harkened back to the conversation I thought a lot about in the beginning, also 3 Days of the Condor, those sort of films, and Dirty Harry obviously also. I also love the very refined use of music and audio. I love the car chase, that there's no music at all. It just has this palpable intensity. Were there some of the movies that inspired you while making
You've listed some of the absolute greats. I mean, the films that for me are what filmmaking is. And I'm constantly striving to create a movie that looks like a movie should in my head. This is the first time I've really worked on a film that looks like a movie to me. And all of that stems from my being raised watching movies like that. The Conversation is one, and The French Connection, obviously, the films of Alan Pakula, the films of Sidney Lumet, John Ford, John Sturges, a much more classical style of filmmaking. And I had become very frustrated watching modern films in which I felt I wasn't really witnessing action, I was witnessing the impression of action, or the approximation of action. What I learned making this movie is that there's a price for not shooting a movie that way. Action has to be very literal, and it's very difficult to make action dynamic when you're not helping it with the camera. And that tends to put both the camera and the actors in a little bit more danger.
And the movie, I also felt, really walks that tightrope between humor and drama, which is a difficult tightrope to walk, I guess. And it's really pinpointed in that fight scene in the bathtub and in the hallway,
yes,
where it's so comical. But in a way, it's also very realistic, because why would fight scenes always be so meticulously well crafted as they are in the movie? So what's it difficult to walk that tightrope with the movie?
You know, it was and it wasn't. That scene was explicitly worked out on the page as being very fast and very straightforward. It was never meant to be funny. And Tom, when he came to the set and looked at that bathroom, he had an inspiration. He said, this could be really very funny. They're not fighting me. They're fighting the room. They've chosen the wrong space to fight it. And I have to say, I was very curious to see how that was going to work out. And when we saw the first take, which is a very low angle inside the bathtub as those guys come in, we were just in stitches. We thought it was the funniest thing, watching those two guys destroy that entire bathroom, and we knew that sequence was going to work. The trick of that sequence was exactly when to let the audience know that this was not going to turn out the way they thought it would. And I really didn't know how audiences would respond to it, and it's been great.
Yeah, but there's also a lovely edge to not just Tom's performance, but also Jack Reacher as a character. We're used to seeing Tom Cruise play these very clear-cut heroes, Ethan Hunt, and also in Top Gun and so on and so forth. Do you think that was one of the attractions for him also for doing it? And did you talk about giving him that edge and refining it and putting him more in a sort of gray area?
Well, yes. First off, when he expressed interest in the role, I said, "Are you sure you want to do this? Because you tend to play characters who operate under extreme pressure, chasing after the plot of the movie. And Reacher is not someone who experiences pressure. He doesn't respond to it, and he doesn't chase after anything. He lets everything come to him." And I could see in Tom's reaction that was something that he wanted to do. That was a fresh angle for him. And at every turn, when Reacher was taking things to a slightly darker direction, we would stop and we would talk about that. And we were very careful. We wanted to make sure that we maintained the wit and the brutality and the complexity of the books, but that the movie never become punishing. We wanted the movie to be fun. We wanted it to be the sort of movies that, like Dirty Harry, which when you go back and watch it, it's a very dark and very tough movie, but there's something about it that no matter how dark it gets, it's still fun when you walk away from it. That the character himself does not carry a dark burden.
Well, maybe as a final question, just winding the clock back again, I was just thinking, what does it actually do to an aspiring young 25, 26-year-old writer to suddenly win the Oscar for Best Script? Does that put a lot of pressure on you, or is it just pure pleasure? Or?
Absolutely no. It really was a blessing and a curse. It was a wonderful opportunity, and it gave me an extraordinary career, and at the same time, I now had to pay my dues after I had achieved probably the biggest success of my career. And the 10 years after winning the Academy Award were, in a lot of ways, the toughest.
Someone sent those boys to put me down.
Who? It relies on its humor. It's a very dark movie on some levels, and yet probably about sort of 10 minutes in, 7 minutes in, there's a big laugh, when Jack Reacher shows up, right?
I love that.
And it's a wonderful moment, and it sort of lets all the air out, because you've had a very tense opening sequence. You've watched a multiple murder in the opening minutes of the film, and then suddenly you're allowed to laugh, and you think, okay, I get this. It's I'm allowed to kind of go with this, and I'm allowed to find it funny, and I think that's surprising about this film. The dialogue, Tom and I watched a lot of old movies like Howard Hawks films. We watched His Girl Friday. Do you know that film?
Yeah, definitely.
And all about the pace of the dialogue. We watched some Hitchcock films like Notorious. We watched the Thomas Crown Affair. We watched The French Connection. A lot of films where it's action. They're action movies, but the dialogue is crucial. I mean, His Girl Friday is not an action movie, but And we wanted the chemistry between these characters to be based on dialogue, really, to be based on their wit and their intellect and their sort of verbal sparring. It was so much fun to do that with Tom, and it relies on a dedicated actor like Tom Cruise who's prepared to rehearse. Well, it's very exciting, he's Tom Cruise. He's the biggest movie star in the world, and he doesn't disappoint. He walks into a room and it is the man who created all those iconic characters. It's very exciting. But then also the thing you don't expect is that he's so direct and easy to communicate with and helpful and engaged and chivalrous and, a gentleman. And we really rehearsed this film. He wants to be great at it, but he also wanted me to be great, and he wanted all the actors, the ensemble cast, to really make this piece sing. And Chris McQuarrie and Tom and I would probably read through the whole script maybe twice a week during shooting. In a hotel room, we'd have some coffee, we'd have dinner, we'd talk, we'd laugh, we'd play the scenes, we'd play all the characters. We really knew this script backwards and forwards, and I think that's what gave it air and breathing room,
Efter vores interviews på hotellet tog vi til filmens gallapremiere i downtown Stockholm. Her mødte vi igen McQuarrie og Pike, og så var Cruise også dukket op. Det var til med hans første visit i Skandinavien nogensinde. Is it true that you're actually attached to Top Gun 2 and Mission Impossible 5 as IMDb claims, or is it just more rumors?
Top Gun 2 is the myth that will not die. I would love to be involved, but I was unavailable. Right as they were talking about that movie was when Reacher started. I had one meeting with those guys, and it ran away, and now it's number one on the IMDb. And Mission Impossible 5, we've had conversations about it, but it's very early.
We talked about working with Tom Cruise. One of the other things I'd love to hear about, because he seems like such a left field choice as the villain, is Werner Herzog. How is he to have?
It's interesting. No one's brought Werner Herzog up today during the press day. No, it's interesting. You're the first person to mention him. It's a surreal thing being around Werner Herzog, because he's got this voice that sort of gets into your soul, and you start sort of dreaming and hearing his voice in your dreams. It's very disturbing. I think he was really kind of chuffed to be in the film. I remember him ringing Chris up and saying, "Of course I want to be in this film. It's a movie. I want to be in a movie." And you think, yeah, this is a movie. It's good. It's not just a movie. It's a movie.
The only franchise you've actually really delved into is Mission Impossible, but you've both expressed an interest in making this into a franchise. What is it about Jack Reacher that makes this ripe for the franchise treatment?
He's just a great character. When I've read all the books, and when you're going through the books, the worlds he goes into, it's when you look at it, I go, oh my gosh, this is classic cinema. The kind of stories I love telling stories, and to find a character that we could go, to the plains of the Badlands, to New York City and London. You look at the range of geography and kind of people that he interacts with and kind of stories. It would be a lot of fun if we could have fun working on those scripts and those stories.
One of the things I love about Jack Reacher is also that he's not a blue-collar hero in that way. He has a bit more of an edge to him. He's almost more like Vincent from Collateral than he's like Ethan Hunt. Was that part of the attraction also to play him?
I think if you read those books, I find I can't stop. They're page turners, and he is this guy that I think he is in some ways who we want to be, and in some ways the everyman. It's got that point where we go, God. He figures his way out of these situations, and yet he's very human. He gets hit, things go wrong, and somehow he's got to figure his way out. And he gets pulled into these movies, into these stories that he's not necessarily wants to get involved in these. He really is a guy who just wants to be left alone. When I look at classics, you look at Kurosawa's Yojimbo, you look at classic westerns of, Shane, people that go in. It just has that mythic kind of thing that I think in some ways kind of a wish fulfillment for audiences.
I just saw the trailer for Oblivion. I have to say, as a Dane, how was it working with Nikolaj Coster-Waldau?
That's terrific. That's terrific. We worked very hard. Great guy, really nice family. It was really nice.